Но народ России никому и никогда не сломить.
That's what Putin declared just weeks ago, but he never planned for his own people to turn on him while his economy burned. Ukraine's drone campaign has cracked Russia wide open, refineries in flames, the Wildberries empire crumbling, fuel rationing spreading like a crisis from the 1970s. But here's the real story. It's not infrastructure collapsing, it's the social contract. Wages shrinking, businesses folding, the Kremlin hiding economic data too ugly to reveal. The people see it, they feel it, and they're done pretending. From Moscow to the Far East, the chant is the same: Putin out, war over. When a silenced population finally finds its voice, that's not a headline, that's history. Here's what's actually happening on the ground. Ukrainian drones have hit Russian oil refineries 194 times since the start of 2026 alone, and the damage has knocked out more than 42% of the country's total refining capacity. On August 10th, that campaign reached one of Russia's biggest refineries yet, the Tanaco plant in Tatarstan, more than 1,200 kilometers from Ukraine, killing at least 13 people. By that point, every single one of Russia's 11 largest oil refineries had been struck at least once. The result is showing up at the pump in a way the Kremlin cannot easily hide. Gas station lines have returned across at least 12 Russian regions, from Krasnodar to Bashkortostan, with some stations capping drivers at 30 liters of fill. In Orenburg, Governor Yevgeny Solntsev brought back an odd-even license plate rationing system, according to which drivers with license plates ending in an even digit can fill up on even-numbered days, while everyone else fills up on odd-numbered days. In Krasnoyarsk, gasoline mysteriously appeared at half price the day before Putin's own visit, then jumped straight back to full price the moment he left town. Away from the gas pumps, Ukraine has spent the last month targeting something almost nobody predicted: Russia's own version of Amazon. Since July 18th, Ukrainian drones have struck at least 20 Wildberries warehouses, damaging or destroying over a fifth of the company's entire storage capacity and killing at least 13 workers. Satellite imagery now confirms that 1.18 million square meters of storage space has been damaged or destroyed. On August 7th, drone debris struck a Wildberries logistics center in Yekaterinburg, sparking a fire after regional air defenses shot down 8 separate drones overhead. Russia's defense ministry claimed 203 drones down nationwide that same day, across the mainland, Crimea, and the Black Sea combined. The financial damage is spreading fast and landing on ordinary sellers, not just the company itself. One franchise owner, Vasily Klimov, told Reuters his daily deliveries collapsed from 400 parcels to 150, and he's now trying to sell his own business for 1 ruble.
Sales have dropped by about 50% over the past month, and that is because there are almost no deliveries.
He's far from alone. Over 3,100 separate Wildberries pickup points were listed for sale on the Russian marketplace Avito by early August. One fashion brand, Fin Flair, lost stock worth more than 100 million rubles, close to $1.24 million, in a single warehouse fire in the town of Elektrostal back in July. That kind of loss doesn't stay contained to one retailer either. Wildberries' own capital spending jumped from 52.6 billion rubles in 2023 to 310 billion rubles in 2025, and most of that debt sits with 2 of Russia's largest state banks, VTB and Sberbank. Ukraine's own Major Robert Brovdy described the entire strategy plainly, calling Wildberries a sensitive sensor for how comfortable Russia's population still feels, and stating the strikes will continue until the company simply can't bounce back quickly anymore. None of this is showing up honestly in Russia's own statistics either. By the end of 2025, Russia removed key economic data from public access, indicating a deliberate attempt to conceal the real state of its economy, including household income, wages for doctors and teachers, and military casualty figures. Meanwhile, real wages have now fallen for 3 straight months, ending 3 full years of growth. According to a survey conducted by Gallup, 56% of Russians say their living standards are getting worse, the highest share recorded in 20 years of polling. Moscow itself is no longer immune to what's happening across the rest of the country. On August 7th, a powerful explosion shook the Russian capital, rattling windows and walls from the city center all the way to the northern districts. It hit around 11 in the morning and was caught on surveillance cameras across multiple neighborhoods. Moscow's own mayor, Sergei Sobyanin, has stopped pretending the capital sits outside the range of this war. He confirmed that roughly 67% of every drone Ukraine sends toward Russian territory is now aimed specifically at Moscow. On just one single day, Russia's own defense ministry reported shooting down 285 drones in a 12-hour stretch, with intercepts stretching as far east as Bashkortostan. 5 of those drones were heading straight for Moscow itself, something Sobyanin described almost casually as a routine part of daily life in the capital now. Just weeks earlier, in June, Ukrainian drones struck the Moscow oil refinery twice within days of each other, on the 16th and the 18th, knocking out both of its primary distillation units and setting fuel storage tanks on fire close enough that smoke drifted directly over residential neighborhoods. The June 18th strike alone used a mixed formation of FP-1, Liuchi, and Sichin drones, and it didn't stop at the refinery. Drones also hit a nearby market, apartment buildings, and construction sites in the same strike. What that reveals is how far behind Russia's own air defenses actually are. The country still has no unified, nationwide system for spotting drones and no automated way to connect what a sensor detects to a weapon that can actually respond. During the June attack, Russian forces were spotted setting up air defense equipment directly on a civilian highway, a scramble that defense analysts described bluntly as rushed and unprofessional. Thomas Withington, a researcher at Royal United Services Institute, put it even more plainly, saying that Russia's air defense systems were not designed to combat drone attacks. They were designed to shoot down conventional military aircraft, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles. While Moscow deals with its own skies, cracks are also opening from somewhere far harder for the Kremlin to control inside its own ranks. Now, here is where this story takes an unexpected turn. Before we reveal what happened next, do us a favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the Frontline Show. We are the only channel tracking every crack in Russia's war machine as it happens. Trust us, you do not want to miss what is coming. On June 25th, a Russian veteran named Alexander Lunin recorded a video message aimed directly at Putin, warning openly about the possibility of an army rebellion against the Kremlin itself.
Десятки, сотни, тысячи наших солдат сидят в зинданах, наказанные своими командирами. Сидят, гниют, подвергаются пыткам и насилию со стороны так называемых гестапо за то, что они отказались выполнять тупые самоубийственные приказы.
According to Lunin, 3 government officials from the Ministry of Defense and the Interior Ministry approached him personally on June 24th and pressured him into recording that video. He said, the officials told him directly that too many soldiers were being ordered on missions that were simply impossible to survive, that men weren't coming back, and that anyone who refused those orders was being punished for it. His video spread fast, racking up 15 million views on one platform and another 5 million on a second. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov claimed publicly that officials simply hadn't had time yet to watch it. 2 days later, on June 27th, Lunin's home was searched, and he was arrested and held for 11 days. He had already been dismissed from service back in 2025 over dereliction of duty and is not currently fighting. That warning landed against a backdrop of losses that keep climbing sharply. 3 years after the Prigozhin mutiny, Russia's total casualties have grown roughly 6-fold, from around 223,000 back then to nearly 1.4 million dead and wounded now. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has stated that Russia is currently losing up to 35,000 soldiers every month. Even one of the Kremlin's own most loyal television propagandists, Vladimir Solovyov, admitted publicly that there simply isn't enough money left, telling viewers that construction on key military infrastructure projects has already stopped. Russia is now pouring roughly 50% of its entire government budget into the military, compared to only about 15% in the United States. Crimea itself has become one of the clearest signs of how much strain this war has actually placed on Russia. Roughly half the peninsula is currently without power, and civilian gasoline sales there have been completely halted. Ukraine has already sunk the flagship cruiser Moskva and forced Russia to evacuate its naval headquarters in Sevastopol, while the land bridge Russia relies on to supply Crimea now sits restricted to military traffic only under constant drone surveillance. Analysts increasingly argue that Ukraine isn't actually trying to retake Crimea outright, but rather make it impossible for Russia to hold militarily, with the $4 billion Kerch Bridge widely seen as the final target in that campaign. Retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges has argued for a long time that Crimea is the true decisive ground of this entire war, and that losing it may be the one thing Putin simply cannot survive politically. The clearest sign that Putin's grip on the political system is tightening rather than loosening came on August 10th. When Russia's own Supreme Court barred Yabloko, the country's only registered anti-war party, from running in September's parliamentary elections. What makes the timing so strange is that Yabloko had already been approved and given an official ballot spot just 5 days earlier, before the court reversed that decision entirely. The lawsuit came from Alexei Zhuravlev, chairman of the pro-Kremlin Rodina party, who accused Yabloko of financial violations and foreign funding. Rodina went further, framing Yabloko's anti-war position itself as, in their words, support for extremism, and accused the party of effectively calling on Russia to abandon territory it now claims as its own. Russia's Central Election Committee backed that argument, telling the court it had uncovered foreign funding sources tied to Yabloko candidates. Mikhail Khodorkovsky, the exiled businessman Russia has formally labeled a foreign agent, was specifically accused by Zhuravlev of financing the party. The court's own numbers, once made public, painted a fairly small picture for something used to justify banning an entire party. Judges found that Yabloko received roughly $36,000, about 2.8 million rubles, from foreign counterparties in the weeks between July 9th and August 2nd, traced through a confidential financial monitoring certificate. Zooming out further, the court claimed 74 people connected to Yabloko had received a combined total of close to $966,000, around 80 million rubles, from 310 foreign individuals across Germany, Canada, Britain, and Turkey, spread out between April 2023 and August 2026. Yabloko's chairman, Nikolai Rybakov, pushed back directly, arguing the money came from the legal sale of foreign shares and that the actual remaining foreign funds in question amounted to just $200. The court session itself stretched past 9 hours before Judge Vyacheslav Kirilov delivered the ruling. None of this happened in a political vacuum either. Public support for the war itself has fallen to 66%, with only 8% Russians believing that the war against Ukraine is progressing successfully, the lowest level recorded since Russia's full-scale invasion began back in February 2022, according to Russia's own Levada Center. Yabloko, despite never crossing the 5% threshold needed for parliamentary seats in over 2 decades, and pulling in just 1.34% in the last election in 2021, was still polling around 3% this year, a modest number that nonetheless represented the only legal outlet left for anti-war voters. Yulia Navalnaya, widow of the late opposition leader, publicly urged Russians to vote for Yabloko specifically because it remained, in her words, the only legal and safe way left to express dissent. Academic analysts view Yabloko's role a little differently than most Western observers do. David Sakonyi of George Washington University has argued the Kremlin has long used Yabloko as a kind of safety valve, a party allowed to exist specifically to absorb protest votes that could never actually translate into real seats. Yabloko co-founder Grigory Yavlinsky framed the ban itself as proof of exactly that fear, saying the decision spoke volumes about how much stronger public demand for peace and freedom had grown than authorities ever expected. While Russia's political opposition fights for survival on two fronts at once, an entirely different crisis is quietly playing out across the country's farmland, and it's one the Kremlin has far less ability to spin. Russia's ongoing fuel shortage is now directly threatening this year's harvest, with field operations running behind schedule across 2.5 million hectares, roughly 12% of the entire area Russia has under cultivation. Farmers have brought in just 21 million metric tons of grain so far, and the harvest across southern Russia is now running as much as 2 weeks behind normal timing. The shortage driving all of this is severe. Diesel availability on the domestic market has fallen to roughly 80% of what farmers actually need, a direct result of nearly a dozen of Russia's largest refineries being damaged by strikes. Putin personally issued a directive ordering strict fuel delivery schedules specifically for farms, but Agriculture Minister Oksana Lut was blunt about the reality on the ground, admitting there are rough patches on the ground, and will work through them with each specific region and business as needed. Large agricultural operations with their own stockpiled reserves can generally still finish their harvests on schedule. Smaller, independent farmers have no such cushion and are increasingly forced to buy diesel on the open spot market at prices so high that in some regions, harvesting the crop is reportedly no longer economically worthwhile at all. Export routes are shrinking at the same time production is slowing. Ukrainian strikes on shipping through the Sea of Azov have restricted a route that normally handles roughly 25% of all Russian grain exports, pushing Russia to look at rail alternatives instead. Analysts have already cut their forecasts for Russia's grain exports by 20%, and wheat prices have followed the slide downward, falling 2.8% in a single week and sitting 12.6% lower than a year earlier. Making matters worse for smaller farms, Russia's own agriculture ministry chose this exact moment to cut preferential lending, right as many farm operations are running at little more than break-even. Siberia has been hit earliest and hardest. The Irkutsk region and Altai Krai were among the first areas in the entire country to report diesel shortages, tracing directly back to a strike on the Omsk refinery. Russia responded by banning diesel exports outright and searching abroad for replacement fuel, but Belarus, Kazakhstan, and India have all declined to supply any additional volume. India's own 3 largest state-owned refineries confirmed directly that they simply have no surplus diesel available to sell back to Russia, a strange twist given how much crude oil Russia continues shipping to India in the first place. Ukraine's own foreign intelligence service summed up where the remaining fuel actually goes, noting that Russia's military consumes somewhere between 3 and 5% more fuel than originally planned, and that in any shortage, the army is served first. Farmers, in their assessment, get whatever is left over, if anything is left at all. Russia's government has responded to the broader fuel crisis with a set of technical workarounds that come with their own serious downsides. The Ministry of Transport proposed lowering the freezing point standard for jet fuel from -60 degrees Celsius down to -50, a change expected to boost output by somewhere between 170,000 and 250,000 tons a month. The catch is that fuel meeting the lower standard is unsuitable for military equipment and cannot safely be used in Russia's coldest regions at all, including Moscow, St. Petersburg, Tatarstan, Yakutia, and Bashkiria. One industry source warned the lower-grade fuel actually crystallizes and clogs engine lines in extreme cold, creating a direct safety risk rather than solving one. Russia separately loosened its standards for ordinary automotive gasoline as well, permitting the sale of lower-grade Euro 2 through Euro 4 fuels all the way until July 2027, alongside a temporary ban on aviation fuel exports running from June through November. By this point, 3 2.2 gas stations across the country have closed or gone offline for repairs since the start of 2026 alone. Strikes have continued reaching deep into Russia's fuel infrastructure throughout this same stretch, including the RESIGN oil refinery, one of the country's largest with a capacity of 17 million tons a year, and a separate strike on July 29th that hit both a Black Sea Fleet fast boat base in Crimea and a radar station in the Bryansk region on the very same day. Even as fuel runs short at home, Russia is pressing ahead with a very different kind of infrastructure project abroad. Moscow and North Korea are nearing completion on a road bridge worth more than $100 million connecting the two countries directly, a project that has raised concern among analysts about future transfers of military personnel and ammunition between the two allies. The bridge spans the Tumen River between Kherson in Russia's far east and Tumongang in North Korea, a remote stretch of borderland where the river marks the final miles of the frontier before reaching the coast. Meanwhile, to plug its own aviation fuel gap, Russia has started importing jet fuel from South Korea and Japan. Against that backdrop, consumer confidence inside Russia has fallen to its lowest point since May 2022, according to Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service, with Agriculture Minister Lut left urging farmers toward hybrid engines and natural gas vehicles, a solution that offers nothing close to immediate relief for a harvest already running weeks behind. A crumbling fuel network at home while Moscow bankrolls a bridge to Pyongyang tells you everything about where Russia's priorities actually sit right now. But grounded planes and empty gas tanks aren't the only thing Russia's struggling to keep in the air. Its drones aren't faring much better, and that's exactly the story we broke down in our last video. We showed you how a $2,000 Ukrainian interceptor called the Sting tore through more than 3,000 Russian Shahed and Juran drones in a single month, built not by a state defense contractor, but by a scrappy nonprofit running mostly on donations. If a country this strained can still lose that badly in the sky, on top of everything unraveling on the ground, it's worth understanding exactly how that's happening. Go watch it next, because between empty gas stations and burning drones, the full picture of just how much strain Russia's war machine is actually under starts to come into focus. This is the Frontline Show, and this war is moving faster than almost anyone is prepared for. We'll see you in the next one.